The moment my 7-year-old daughter, Emma, and 9-year-old son, Lucas, splashed into the crystal-clear pool at my mother's 4th of July party, her voice cut through the Hampton summer air like a razor blade. "Get out of the pool!" Patricia screamed, her face twisted with disgust as she pointed at my children. This party is for respectable family only, not divorced failures. 50 guests turned to stare as my kids climbed out, dripping wet tears mixing with chlorine water on their confused faces. I gathered our bright yellow towels in silence, while whispers erupted around us, my successful brother Jake, smirking from his poolside chair. None of them knew that I secretly owned this very beach house. My hands trembled as I wrapped Emma's shivering shoulders with the damp towel, guiding both children toward the pool house to change clothes. The guests had formed small clusters around the deck, their hushed conversations clearly about us. I caught fragments of their words floating across the warm afternoon breeze. "Poor Patricia having to deal with that embarrassment," murmured Mrs. Henderson, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. "I heard he lost his job and drives for Uber now," whispered another voice behind a martini glass. The pool house felt like a refuge until I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Through the small window, I watched my ex-wife, Amanda, step out of a sleek black Mercedes, followed by her new fiancé, Brad Wellington. My stomach dropped. She wasn't supposed to be here today. "Daddy, why is Mommy here?" Lucas asked, pulling his Superman t-shirt over his wet hair. "I don't know, buddy. Let's go find out." But I already knew this wouldn't be good. Amanda never showed up anywhere without a purpose, and bringing Brad to my mother's party meant she wanted to make a statement. We emerged from the pool house to find Patricia embracing Amanda like a long-lost daughter, her demeanor completely transformed from the fury she'd shown us minutes earlier. "Amanda, darling, and Brad, how wonderful to see you again." Brad Wellington stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with perfectly styled silver hair, and a confidence that came from never worrying about money. His navy blue polo shirt probably cost more than my monthly rent, and his smile never quite reached his cold gray eyes. "Mrs. Morrison, thank you for including us," Brad said, shaking Patricia's hand with practiced charm. "This is quite an impressive gathering you've organized." Amanda wore a flowing white sundress that highlighted her recent tan from their vacation to the Cayman Islands. She'd posted the pictures on social media, making sure I saw them during my designated video calls with the kids. Her blonde hair was pulled back in an elegant updo, and she looked every inch the successful real estate agent she'd become since our divorce. "Well, we believe in celebrating with family who truly contribute to society," Patricia announced, her voice carrying across the deck. "Brad, I understand you're quite successful in finance." "Hedge fund management," he replied smoothly. "I've been fortunate to build something meaningful. These children deserve a stable father figure who can provide real security." My blood ran cold. This was a setup. Emma tugged at my hand. "Daddy, I'm hungry. Can we get some of those little sandwiches?" "Of course, sweetheart." I guided them towards the buffet table, hoping to avoid the growing spectacle. But Amanda's voice followed us. "Actually, that's perfect timing," she called out, approaching with Brad and Patricia flanking her like bodyguards. "Children, I have some important news to share with you." The party guests had formed an obvious circle around us, now sensing drama. Jake abandoned his lounger and moved closer, his wife Sharon, following with their perfectly dressed twin daughters. "What news, Mommy?" Emma asked innocently, reaching for a cucumber sandwich. Amanda knelt down to the children's eye level, her voice taking on that artificially sweet tone she used when performing for an audience. "Well, darlings, Brad and I have been talking with Grandma Patricia, and we think it might be best if you came to live with us full-time. Permanently." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Amanda, this isn't the time or place." "Actually, Damien, this is exactly the right time," she interrupted, standing up to face me directly. "These children need stability. They need a proper home with 2 parents who can provide for them. Not..." She gestured vaguely at my damp clothes and flip-flops. This. Brad stepped forward, placing a possessive hand on Amanda's shoulder. I've spoken with my attorney about adoption procedures. We want to give Emma and Lucas the life they deserve. The life they deserve! I repeated, my voice barely controlled. They have a father who loves them. Love doesn't pay for college tuition, Patricia interjected sharply. Love doesn't provide health insurance or stable housing. Damien, you're 32 years old, living in a tiny apartment, driving strangers around for money. Is that really what's best for these children? Jake finally spoke up, his voice dripping with false concern. Brother, we're worried about you. Ever since the divorce, you've been spiraling. Maybe it's time to admit you need help. What kind of help? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Professional help, Amanda said quietly, her implication clear. The kind that might help you understand why fighting for custody isn't in anyone's best interest. The guests were watching like spectators at a tennis match, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Mrs. Patterson held her phone slightly raised, clearly recording. The Hendersons whispered behind their hands. Even the catering staff had slowed their work to listen. Emma began crying quietly, overwhelmed by the adult conversation swirling around her. Lucas moved closer to me, his small hand finding mine. Here's what's going to happen. Patricia announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a courtroom judge delivering a verdict. I've made a decision about the family inheritance. Jake, as the responsible son, who's maintained his marriage and built a successful real estate business, will inherit everything. The beach house, the investment properties, the trust fund, all of it. The declaration hit the crowd like a bombshell. Several guests gasped audibly. Jake's wife, Sharon, couldn't suppress a small smile of triumph. Mother, you can't be serious. I said, though I knew from her expression that she was completely serious. I'm entirely serious. Divorced men don't make good inheritors. They make poor financial decisions, they can't maintain stable relationships, and they certainly can't be trusted with family legacy. Jake has proven himself worthy. You've proven quite the opposite. The applause started slowly from Mrs. Patterson, then spread through the crowd like a wave. 50 people clapped for my public humiliation, for my children's disinheritance, for the systematic destruction of everything I thought I could count on. This is wrong, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. These are your grandchildren. They'll be fine, Patricia replied coldly. Amanda and Brad will provide for them properly. You can visit occasionally once you get your life together, if you get your life together. Amanda smiled triumphantly, already moving to comfort Emma while positioning Brad as the stable father figure. The message was crystal clear. I was being erased from my own family. As the guests began to disperse back to their conversations and cocktails, treating my destruction like afternoon entertainment, one thought burned in my mind. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea what I'd sacrificed to give them this perfect day in this perfect place. Most importantly, they had no idea that every insult, every humiliation, every moment of their cruelty was happening on property I owned. My alarm clock buzzed at 6:30 the next morning, but I'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of my small apartment and replaying every devastating moment from the party. The walls felt closer than usual in the pale morning light filtering through my single-bedroom window. My coffee maker gurgled to life as I stumbled to the kitchen, trying to push away the image of my children's confused faces when Amanda announced her custody intentions. The phone rang while I was still in my pajamas, the caller ID showing an unknown number. Hello, is this Damien Morrison? The voice belonged to a professional woman, crisp and businesslike. Speaking. This is Margaret Foster from Hampton Premier Properties. I'm calling regarding the Ocean View Drive rental property. There's been a situation with your mother's lease agreement. My pulse quickened, though I kept my voice neutral. What kind of situation? The property owner has decided to terminate Mrs. Morrison's lease effective immediately. There were violations of the property respect clauses, specifically regarding the treatment of guests, and the overall atmosphere maintained on the premises. I nearly smiled despite everything. When do they need to vacate? By the end of the week. The owner was quite specific about the timeline. Mrs. Morrison seemed to think you might have some influence with the landlord. She mentioned you might be able to help resolve this misunderstanding. I'm afraid I can't help with that, I replied, choosing my words carefully. These things tend to work themselves out. After hanging up, I sat at my small kitchen table with my coffee, finally allowing myself a moment of satisfaction. But it lasted only seconds before my phone rang again. Damien. Patricia's voice screeched through the speaker before I could say hello. What did you do? What did you say to them? Good morning to you too, Mother. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't play innocent with me. The realtor called and said they're kicking me out of the beach house. You must have complained to someone, stirred up trouble because of yesterday. Fix this. I didn't complain to anyone, I said truthfully. Maybe they just don't appreciate how you treat people at their property. Those were my guests. My family. I can invite whoever I want and handle situations however I see fit. You embarrassed yourself yesterday, not me. Now call whoever you need to call and straighten this mess out. The irony was almost too perfect. Mother, I work as an Uber driver. What connections do you think I have with Hampton real estate owners? She paused, clearly struggling with this logic. Well, you must know someone. You grew up here. Find out who owns that house and make this right. Why don't you ask Jake? He's the successful real estate agent in the family. Surely he can help. I already called him. He's looking into it, but he needs more time. I need you to do whatever you can from your end. After she hung up, I allowed myself to imagine her panic. Patricia Morrison had built her entire social identity around that beach house. She'd hosted charity luncheons, book club meetings, and elaborate dinner parties there for 3 years. Her friends knew her as the woman with the Hampton rental, the sophisticated hostess who could afford waterfront living. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Daddy, Mommy says we might not see you as much anymore because poor people can't take care of children properly. Is that true? My daughter's innocent question felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I immediately called Amanda's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. Daddy's calling. I heard Emma's voice faintly in the background of my third attempt, followed by Amanda's sharp, "Don't answer that." The custody battle was already beginning, and Amanda was using psychological warfare on our children. I needed help. I was still contemplating my limited options when someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Jake standing in the hallway, wearing his expensive charcoal suit and holding a manila folder. "We need to talk," he said when I opened the door. "About what?" "About yesterday, about the family, about what's best for everyone involved." He pushed past me into the living room without being invited, his eyes scanning my modest furnishings with obvious judgment. "Nice place," he said sarcastically, taking in my second-hand couch and small television. "Thanks, I like it." "Damien, sit down. I want to show you something." He opened the manila folder and spread several documents across my coffee table. These are financial records, employment history, rental agreements, insurance policies. My blood ran cold as I recognized my own bank statements, tax returns, and employment termination letter from my marketing firm. "Where did you get these?" "That's not important. What's important is that Amanda's lawyer has copies of all of this. Your credit score, your debt-to-income ratio, your employment gap, your current housing situation. It doesn't look good, brother." I picked up my bank statement, noting it was from just 2 weeks ago. "Jake, how did you get recent financial information about me? This is illegal." He shrugged casually. "Family looks out for family. We've been worried about you for months. Someone had to document what was really happening." "Document what exactly?" "Your decline, your inability to maintain stable employment, your poor financial decisions, the fact that you're raising children in a one-bedroom apartment while working a job with no benefits or security." He pulled out his phone and showed me several photos. "This is your car, correct? A 2008 Honda Civic. with 173,000 miles on it. The photos showed my car from multiple angles taken in different locations over several weeks. You've been following me. We've been concerned. Look, Damien, this isn't personal. It's about what's best for Emma and Lucas. They deserve stability. They deserve a father figure who can actually provide for them. I am their father. Biologically, yes. But practically, look around, brother. Look at where you're living. Look at what you're driving. Look at what you can offer them versus what Amanda and Brad can provide. Jake pulled out more photos from his folder. Pictures of me in my Uber driver uniform picking up passengers outside bars late at night. Images of me at the grocery store carefully checking prices and using coupons. Photos of the children visiting my apartment, Emma sleeping on the fold-out couch that served as her bed. You've been stalking me, I said, my voice barely controlled. I've been documenting reality, and the reality is that you're struggling. There's no shame in admitting it. There's no shame in stepping aside and letting people who can properly care for Emma and Lucas take over. He pulled out one final document, placing it on top of the pile. This is a voluntary custody relinquishment agreement. You sign this, and Amanda gets full custody. You get visitation rights every other weekend supervised initially. In exchange, we don't have to go through a messy court battle where all of this becomes public record. I stared at the legal document, my name already typed in the designated spaces. You've already drawn this up. Amanda's lawyer prepared it yesterday after the party. We figured you'd want to handle this quietly with dignity. The folder represented months of surveillance, illegal acquisition of private financial information, and systematic documentation of every struggle I'd faced since my divorce. My own brother had been building a case against me, treating me like a criminal under investigation. Jake, these children are my life. They're everything to me. I know you love them, but love isn't enough. They need college funds, health insurance, stable housing, educational opportunities. They need a father who can take them on vacations, buy them nice clothes, give them experiences that matter. He stood up, straightening his tie with practiced precision. Think about it, Damien. Really think about it. What can you give them that Brad can't give them better? After he left, I sat alone with his folder of evidence, understanding for the first time that this wasn't just a custody dispute. This was a calculated campaign to remove me from my children's lives, orchestrated by people who saw me as an obstacle to their perfect family vision. The worst part was that they were using my love for Emma and Lucas against me. They knew I would do anything to protect my children from pain, even if it meant sacrificing my own relationship with them. But they had made one critical error in their planning. They assumed I was as powerless as I appeared. They assumed I had no resources, no options, no way to fight back. They had no idea what I was really capable of. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as I drove through the winding roads of the Hampton neighborhoods, my Honda's air conditioning struggling against the July heat. I needed to think, and somehow being near the beach house helped me process everything that had happened. The familiar route felt like muscle memory, even though I'd only visited openly a handful of times since buying the property. As I approached Ocean View Drive, I spotted Patricia's silver Lexus parked haphazardly across the street from the beach house. She stood on the front lawn, gesticulating wildly at Margaret Foster, who maintained professional composure despite the obvious confrontation. I parked 3 houses down and rolled down my windows close enough to hear their conversation, but far enough to remain unnoticed behind a large hedge. This is completely unreasonable. Patricia's voice carried across the manicured lawns. I've been a model tenant for 3 years. I've never missed a payment, never damaged anything, never caused any problems. Margaret Foster, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled into a neat bun, held her ground firmly. Mrs. Morrison, the property owner, was very clear about their concerns. The treatment of guests, particularly children, violated the respectful family environment clauses in your lease agreement. Those weren't random children, that was my son and his kids. I have every right to handle family situations as I see fit. The property owner disagrees. They specifically cited the public humiliation of family members as creating a hostile environment that reflects poorly on the property's reputation. Patricia's face reddened with frustration. Fine, I'll apologize to Damien. I'll make it right. Just tell the owner I'll fix whatever they think was wrong. The decision is final, Mrs. Morrison. You have until Friday to remove all personal belongings. The cleaning service will handle the rest. I watched Margaret Foster walk to her car with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. Patricia stood alone on the lawn for several minutes, staring at the beach house like she could will it back into her possession through sheer determination. She finally got into her Lexus and drove off in the direction of downtown Hampton. On impulse, I followed her at a safe distance, my curiosity overcoming my better judgment. Patricia parked outside Jake's real estate office on Main Street, a converted Victorian house, with an elegant sign reading, Morrison and Associates Premium Properties. I found a parking spot across the street at a coffee shop and watched through my rearview mirror as she stormed through the front door. The coffee shop had large windows facing the street, so I ordered an iced coffee and chose a table with a clear view of Jake's office. I didn't have to wait long. Through the second-floor window of Jake's office, I could see him and Patricia in animated conversation. She was pacing back and forth, her hands moving dramatically as she spoke. Jake sat behind his desk, occasionally reaching for documents or making notes. After about 20 minutes, I saw Jake pull out a folder and spread papers across his desk. Even from across the street, I recognized the manila folder from his visit to my apartment that morning. He was showing Patricia the surveillance evidence he'd collected on me. My blood boiled as I watched my mother examine photographs of my car, my apartment, my financial struggles. Jake pointed at various documents clearly explaining how they planned to use this information against me in court. But what happened next shocked me even more. Patricia threw back her head and laughed. Actually laughed. She picked up what looked like my grocery store receipts and waved them in the air, her face animated with cruel amusement. She was mocking my financial struggles, treating my efforts to budget and provide for my children like entertainment. Jake joined in her laughter, pointing at different pages and shaking his head with exaggerated disbelief. They were having fun with my misery. I pulled out my phone and started recording through the window. The image quality wasn't perfect, but it clearly showed both of them laughing over my personal financial documents. Patricia said something that made Jake laugh even harder. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, returning with another folder. This one was larger, bulging with papers. When he opened it, I saw more photographs, more documents, more evidence of systematic surveillance. Jake spread out what appeared to be a timeline on his desk. Even from my distant vantage point, I could see it was organized chronologically, documenting my activities over several months. He'd been tracking my daily routine, my work schedule, my children's visits, everything. They were building a comprehensive case to prove I was unfit to be a father, and they were enjoying every minute of it. But then Jake did something that made my stomach drop. He pulled out his laptop and opened what looked like a presentation. As he clicked through slides, I could see images of my apartment, close-up photos of my car's interior, even pictures of Emma and Lucas during their visits with me. Patricia nodded approvingly at each slide, occasionally pointing at specific details. They were reviewing their surveillance evidence like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Jake reached for his phone and made a call. Through the window, I could see him speaking animatedly to someone, occasionally gesturing at the documents on his desk. After a few minutes, he handed the phone to Patricia. Patricia's conversation was brief but intense. She wrote something down on a piece of paper, then handed the phone back to Jake. They both smiled with satisfaction. I finished my coffee and walked closer to the building, hoping to overhear even fragments of their conversation. The old Victorian had thin walls, and with the summer heat, many windows were open. "Loan shark contact says he can have the money ready by tomorrow," Jake was saying as I passed beneath their window. "Perfect. Once Damien signs the loan papers, we'll have him exactly where we need him," Patricia replied. "Owing money to dangerous people gives us even more ammunition for the custody case. And if he refuses to sign, then we tell the court he's selfish and won't help family members in crisis. Either way, he loses." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were planning to force me into debt, with predatory lenders then use that debt as evidence of my irresponsibility. If I refused to help Patricia with her housing crisis, they'd paint me as selfish. If I agreed to help, they'd use my debt as proof I couldn't handle finances. It was a perfect trap. Jake's voice came through the window again. Amanda's lawyer loves the bank records. Says the judge will see exactly what kind of provider Damien really is. How did you get current bank statements anyway? Patricia asked. I have a contact at First National, college buddy who works in customer accounts. Technically, it's against policy, but he owes me a favor from when I helped him buy his house. And he's willing to keep providing information. For now, but we should move fast before someone notices the unauthorized access. My hands shook as I realized the full scope of their criminal behavior. Jake was using illegal access to my financial records, committing federal privacy violations to build their custody case. I walked back to my car, my mind reeling from everything I'd witnessed. My own family wasn't just unsupportive. They were actively conspiring to destroy my life using criminal methods. But I had something they didn't know about. I had resources they couldn't imagine. And most importantly, I had the truth. The question was, how long should I let them dig their hole before I buried them in it? As I drove home, one thought burned brighter than all the rest. They were planning to use my children as leverage to force me into financial ruin, all while laughing about my struggles. That was a mistake they would regret for the rest of their lives. 3 days later, I was reviewing daily expenses at my kitchen table when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young man in a crisp suit holding an official-looking envelope. Damien Morrison. You're being served with emergency custody papers. My hands trembled as I read Amanda's petition for emergency supervised visitation, only citing recent evidence of financial instability and deceptive behavior that poses emotional harm to minor children. The court date was set for the following week. Attached to the petition were copies of my bank statements, employment records, and photographs that could only have come from Jake's surveillance. Amanda's lawyer, Robert Chen, had crafted a devastating narrative of my decline into poverty and instability. But what hit me hardest was a sworn affidavit from Patricia describing my threatening behavior and emotional outbursts at the pool party. She painted a picture of a man becoming increasingly unstable, potentially dangerous to his own children. The document listed specific incidents that never happened, threatening to destroy family relationships, making concerning statements about revenge, and displaying signs of psychological breakdown under financial stress. Every word was a fabrication, but it was crafted with enough believable detail to sound credible to a family court judge. My phone rang while I was still processing the legal papers. Damien, we need to talk immediately. Patricia's voice was unusually urgent. Meet me at Jake's office in 1 hour. I'm busy reading some interesting legal documents. Those documents are exactly why we need to meet. Bring your checkbook. Jake's office felt different this time. Gone was his earlier pretense of brotherly concern, replaced by cold efficiency. Patricia sat in the leather chair across from his desk, wearing her most serious expression. A third person I didn't recognize sat in the corner, a heavy-set man in an ill-fitting suit with calculating eyes. Damien, this is Tony Salvatore from Rapid Cash Solutions, Jake said without preamble. He's here to help with our family crisis. Tony stood and extended a meaty hand. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Morrison. Your family's explained the situation. We can definitely help. What situation is that? Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on the tone she'd used when I was a child in trouble. Damien, I need $60,000 immediately to secure alternative housing. The beach house termination has put me in an impossible position. $60,000 for a rental deposit. For first year's rent security deposits, moving expenses, and furnishing a new place that meets my social obligations. I have a reputation to maintain. Jake slid a loan agreement across his desk. Tony's company can provide the funds immediately. The terms are very reasonable, only 30% annual interest. I nearly laughed out loud. 30%. That's predatory lending. It's a short-term bridge loan, Tony explained smoothly. Your family can pay it back quickly once Mrs. Morrison gets settled. I can't afford a $60,000 loan at 30% interest. Patricia's mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Damien, let me explain something to you. Amanda's custody petition includes testimony from Jake about your commitment to family responsibilities. If you refuse to help your own mother in a crisis, what does that say about your character? Jake opened another folder on his desk. We've also prepared letters from family friends expressing concern about your recent behavior. Dr. Henderson thinks you might be experiencing depression. Mrs. Patterson noticed angry outbursts. The Clarks observed concerning interactions with your children. Those are all lies. Are they? Patricia challenged. Or are they the observations of concerned family friends who've watched you struggle since your divorce? Tony stepped forward, his presence suddenly more intimidating. Mr. Morrison, your family's facing a crisis here. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love. And if I refuse, Jake answered before Tony could speak. Then tomorrow's custody hearing becomes very simple. Amanda presents evidence of your financial irresponsibility, your refusal to help family members in need, and testimony from multiple witnesses about your deteriorating mental state. The judge will see a man who puts his own interests ahead of his children's stability, Patricia added. A man who won't even help his elderly mother secure housing. The trap was perfectly constructed. Sign the loan papers and become financially ruined, proving I couldn't provide for my children. Refuse to sign and be painted as selfish and uncaring, also proving I couldn't provide proper values for my children. There's one more thing, Jake said, reaching for his laptop. Amanda's prepared a character witness video for the court. He turned the screen toward me, and my ex-wife's face filled the display. She sat in what looked like Brad's expensive home office, her expression serious and concerned. Your Honor, I'm deeply worried about Damien's mental state. Over the past several months, he's become increasingly paranoid, making concerning statements about family members plotting against him. He's accused his own brother of surveillance and his mother of conspiracy. These delusions are escalating, and I fear for our children's emotional well-being when they're exposed to his instability. The video continued with Amanda describing fictional incidents, me ranting about imaginary enemies, showing signs of depression, making threats against family members who were only trying to help. She recorded that yesterday, Jake said casually. Amazing how technology makes everything so convenient. I stared at my family members, finally understanding the full scope of their betrayal. They weren't just taking my children. They were systematically destroying my reputation, my finances, and my mental health credibility. You have 10 minutes to decide, Tony said, checking his expensive watch. My office closes soon and Mrs. Morrison needs to sign a lease tomorrow. Patricia stood and moved to the window, her back to me. Damien, I've already called several family friends to tell them about my housing crisis. They know I asked you for help. They're waiting to hear whether my son stepped up in my time of need. The whole community's watching, Jake added. Your response to this crisis will define how people see you for years to come. I looked around the room at 3 people who'd orchestrated my destruction with surgical precision. They'd used my love for my children, my respect for family, and my desire to be seen as a good man against me. But as I sat in that chair surrounded by their lies and manipulation, something inside me shifted. They thought they knew who they were dealing with. They thought they understood my resources, my options, my ability to fight back. They had no idea that while they'd been plotting my downfall, I'd been quietly building something they couldn't imagine. They had no idea that every humiliation, every betrayal, every moment of cruelty was happening in the shadow of a truth that would destroy them all. I need to think about this, I said finally. There's nothing to think about, Patricia snapped, turning back from the window. You help family or you don't. You're a good father or you're not. You're a real man or you're not. Tony gathered his papers with practiced efficiency. I'll give you until tomorrow morning, Mr. Morrison. After that, the offer expires. As I walked out of Jake's office, I felt their eyes following me like predators watching wounded prey. They thought they'd broken me. They thought they'd won. Tomorrow they would learn how wrong they were. I spent that entire night pacing my small apartment, wrestling with decisions that would impact the rest of my life. By dawn, I'd made my choice. Instead of signing Tony's predatory loan agreement, I withdrew the last $3,000 from my emergency savings and hired private investigator Sarah Martinez. Sarah operated out of a small office above a diner on the outskirts of Hampton. She was a former police detective with 15 years of experience in financial crimes and custody investigations. Her reviews online were excellent, though her rates were beyond my normal budget. "Tell me everything," she said, settling behind her cluttered desk with a digital recorder. "Every detail, every person involved, every document you've seen." I spent 2 hours walking through Jake's surveillance, Patricia's lies, Amanda's custody grab, and the financial pressure campaign. Sarah took extensive notes, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or specific incidents. "Your brother's illegal bank access is a federal crime," she said when I finished. "If we can prove it, everyone involved faces serious charges, but I need 48 hours to build a solid case. The custody hearing is tomorrow afternoon. Then we work fast. I'll need copies of everything they've shown you, plus permission to run background checks on all parties involved." That evening, Sarah called with her preliminary findings. "Your brother's been very busy. I found evidence of unauthorized credit pulls on your accounts going back 6 months. He's also been photographing your mail, which violates federal postal regulations. What about the loan shark? Tony Salvatore has 3 active investigations for predatory lending practices. His company targets people in desperate situations and deliberately structures loans to create default cycles. Your mother would never be able to repay $60,000 at 30% interest." By Thursday morning, Sarah had uncovered information that shocked even me. She arrived at my apartment carrying a thick folder and wearing the expression of someone who'd found something significant. "Damien, sit down. What I'm about to tell you changes everything." She opened her folder and pulled out financial records photographs and legal documents. "I ran comprehensive background checks on everyone involved in your custody case. Amanda's fiancé, Brad Wellington, is under SEC investigation for insider trading. His hedge fund is facing potential criminal charges." How does that affect the custody case? A man facing federal financial crimes charges isn't exactly the stable father figure Amanda's claiming he is, but that's not the most interesting discovery. Sarah pulled out surveillance photographs of her own. "I followed Jake and Amanda yesterday. Look at these." The photos showed Jake and Amanda entering a downtown hotel together at 2 in the afternoon. Additional images captured them in intimate conversation at a restaurant holding hands across the table. "They're having an affair." I asked, though the evidence was obvious. "For over a year. I checked hotel records, restaurant receipts, even cell phone data. They've been meeting regularly since before your divorce was finalized." My head spun as the implications hit me. "Jake's been sabotaging my marriage from the beginning. It gets worse. I found financial records showing Jake paid for Amanda's divorce attorney. He's also been covering some of her living expenses, helping her maintain the lifestyle that made her feel justified in leaving you." Sarah spread out more documents. Jake and Amanda have been planning this custody grab for months. They've been positioning Brad as a temporary frontman while they develop their own relationship. The ultimate goal appears to be Jake adopting your children once Amanda's divorce from you is finalized and her engagement to Brad ends. They want to steal my children and create their own family unit. Exactly. And they're using Brad's money and status to make it happen while planning to dispose of him once he's served his purpose. The betrayal cut deeper than anything they'd done before. My brother and ex-wife had been systematically destroying my life while conducting an affair using my children as pawns in their romantic manipulation. "There's one more thing," Sarah said, her expression growing more serious. "I traced the beach house lease payments. The checks are written to Hampton Property Management, But that's just a shell company. The actual property owner is listed under an LLC called Ocean View Holdings. Do you know who owns that company? I'm still investigating, but the ownership structure is deliberately obscured. Multiple shell companies, complex financial arrangements. Someone went to great lengths to keep their identity hidden. By Thursday evening, Sarah had gathered enough evidence to fill 3 manila folders. Illegal financial surveillance mail tampering predatory lending schemes, adultery, and conspiracy to defraud me of custody rights. This is enough to destroy their custody case and potentially send Jake to federal prison, she said, as we reviewed the evidence one final time. But are you prepared for the nuclear option? Once we present this in court, there's no going back. Your family relationships will be permanently destroyed. I thought about Emma asking if poor people couldn't take care of children properly. I thought about Lucas watching his grandmother humiliate his father at a pool party. I thought about Jake and Amanda laughing over my grocery receipts while planning to steal my children. They destroyed the family relationships first, I said. I'm just defending myself. Then we're ready for tomorrow's hearing. But as I lay in bed that night, one thought kept nagging at me. Sarah had seemed surprised by the complexity of the beach house ownership structure. She'd made a comment about someone going to great lengths to obscure their identity. Tomorrow, everyone would discover just how great those lengths had been. The family courthouse buzzed with typical Thursday afternoon activity as I entered with my newly hired attorney, David Chen, no relation to Amanda's lawyer, despite the shared surname. David was a family law specialist who'd reviewed Sarah's evidence and agreed to take my case on short notice. Amanda sat at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, Robert Chen, looking confident in a navy blue business suit. Jake and Patricia occupied the first row of spectator seats, both dressed formally and wearing expressions of supportive concern. Brad Wellington sat beside Patricia, his presence lending credibility to Amanda's claims about providing stability for the children. Judge Margaret Sullivan called the court to order at exactly 2 o'clock. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to custody cases and her intolerance for parental manipulation. We're here for an emergency custody hearing in the matter of Morrison versus Morrison, Judge Sullivan announced. Mr. Robert Chen, please present your client's case. Amanda's lawyer stood confidently armed with Jake's surveillance evidence and Patricia's false affidavits. Your Honor, Mrs. Wellington seeks emergency modification of custody arrangements due to documented evidence of the father's financial instability and deteriorating mental health. He presented my bank statement's employment termination letter and photographs of my modest living conditions with theatrical precision. Each piece of evidence was designed to paint me as an unfit father, spiraling into poverty and instability. The respondent's own family members have expressed serious concerns about his ability to provide adequate care for these children. Robert Chen continued gesturing toward Jake and Patricia. His brother will testify about Mr. Morrison's increasing paranoia and aggressive behavior. Jake took the witness stand with practiced confidence, his expensive suit and professional demeanor lending weight to his testimony. Your Honor, I've watched my brother struggle since his divorce. He's become increasingly suspicious of family members who are trying to help him. He makes accusations about surveillance and conspiracy that have no basis in reality. Can you give specific examples, Mr. Morrison? He accused me of illegally accessing his financial records, which is absurd. He claimed our mother was plotting against him at a family gathering. He's shown signs of depression, paranoia, and an inability to accept constructive criticism about his lifestyle choices. Patricia testified next, describing my threatening behavior at the pool party and my refusal to accept family support during a difficult time. Her performance was masterful, a concerned mother worried about her grandchildren's exposure to their father's instability. The children were visibly upset by their father's behavior, she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I fear they're absorbing his negativity and paranoia. Emma asked me why Daddy thinks everyone is mean to him. Amanda's testimony was the most devastating. She described months of concerning phone calls where I allegedly ranted about family conspiracies and made threats against people trying to help me. The children come home from visits talking about how everyone's unfair to Daddy, how the world is against him. They're developing the same paranoid mindset, Your Honor. I'm genuinely afraid for their emotional well-being. By 3:30, Amanda's case seemed overwhelming. The evidence of my financial struggles was real, even if obtained illegally. The testimony about my behavior was fabricated, but delivered convincingly by respected community members. Judge Sullivan looked prepared to rule in Amanda's favor when David Chen stood for my defense. Your Honor, before we proceed, I need to present evidence of criminal conspiracy that directly impacts this case. Robert Chen objected immediately. Your Honor, this appears to be a desperate attempt to deflect from clear evidence of unfitness. I'll allow it, Judge Sullivan said, but it better be relevant, Counselor. David presented Sarah's investigation findings methodically. Bank records showing unauthorized access to my accounts. Photographs of Jake entering secure areas of the bank where he had no business being. Documentation of his friend's illegal provision of private financial information. Your Honor, the financial evidence against my client was obtained through federal privacy violations. Mr. Jake Morrison has been criminally surveilling his own brother for months. Jake's confident demeanor cracked as David presented time-stamped photos of him photographing my mail following my car and documenting my personal activities without consent. Furthermore, David continued, we have evidence of an ongoing affair between Mr. Jake Morrison and the petitioner Mrs. Wellington dating back to before her divorce was finalized. The courtroom erupted. Amanda went pale. Jake started to stand in protest, and Patricia looked genuinely shocked for the first time. David presented hotel records, restaurant receipts, and surveillance photos of Jake and Amanda together in obviously romantic situations. This custody petition isn't about child welfare, Your Honor. It's about two people attempting to steal these children while conducting an extramarital affair. Judge Sullivan demanded order in the courtroom. Mr. Jake Morrison, return to your seat immediately. Mrs. Wellington, did you know this evidence would be presented today? Amanda's composure completely collapsed. Your Honor, I can explain. You'll explain during your criminal trial, Judge Sullivan interrupted. Mr. David Chen, continue. David presented evidence of the predatory lending scheme, the falsified character witnesses, and the systematic campaign to destroy my reputation through fabricated mental health concerns. Your Honor, every piece of evidence against my client was obtained illegally or fabricated entirely. This isn't a custody case. It's a criminal conspiracy involving fraud, identity theft, and perjury. Judge Sullivan reviewed the evidence for 20 minutes, while the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Jake and Amanda whispered frantically with their attorneys. Patricia stared at the floor, clearly processing the scope of her son's betrayal. Finally, the judge spoke. I'm immediately ordering an investigation into evidence tampering and perjury in this case. All testimony provided by Jake Morrison and Patricia Morrison is hereby stricken from the record. Robert Chen attempted damage control. Your Honor, regardless of how the evidence was obtained, Mr. Morrison's financial situation remains a legitimate concern. Actually, Counselor, there's one more piece of evidence to consider. David interrupted. Your Honor, may I present property ownership records? If they're relevant to custody determination, proceed. David pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before and handed documents to both the judge and Amanda's attorney. Your Honor, the beach house where this family drama began, the property that Mrs. Patricia Morrison has been leasing for 3 years, is owned by my client. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even Judge Sullivan looked surprised. Mr. Morrison owns the very property where he was publicly humiliated by his own family. Every insult, every moment of cruelty, every act of betrayal took place on land he purchased and graciously allowed his mother to use without revealing his ownership. I watched Jake's face drain of all color. Amanda stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Patricia's mouth opened and closed without sound. Furthermore, David continued, Mr. Morrison purchased this property 3 years ago, specifically as a gift to his family, managing it through a property management company to maintain anonymity, while his mother enjoyed waterfront living at below-market rates. Judge Sullivan examined the property deed purchase records and lease agreements. Mr. Morrison, is this accurate? You've owned this property for 3 years without telling your family. I stood slowly, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. Yes, Your Honor. I wanted to surprise them eventually, but I learned some important lessons about character instead. The judge looked around the courtroom at the stunned faces. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The family that just testified about your financial instability and poor judgment was living rent-subsidized on property you secretly owned while they publicly humiliated you. That's correct, Your Honor. Judge Sullivan set down the documents and looked directly at Amanda. Mrs. Wellington, you're seeking custody based on financial stability concerns while your children's father secretly owns valuable Hampton real estate. Amanda couldn't form words. The irony was too massive, the reversal too complete. Mr. Robert Chen, does your client wish to continue with this petition? Robert Chen conferred desperately with Amanda, but there was nothing left to salvage. The entire foundation of their case had collapsed, revealing not financial instability, but extraordinary generosity that had been repaid with systematic betrayal. Judge Sullivan's ruling was swift and decisive. I'm granting primary custody to Mr. Damian Morrison and ordering Mrs. Wellington to pay child support. I'm also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. As the gavel fell, I looked around the courtroom at the wreckage of my family's conspiracy. Jake sat with his head in his hands, facing federal charges. Amanda stared at the table, her custody dreams destroyed. Patricia looked genuinely confused, as if she couldn't process how completely their plan had backfired. But more importantly, I thought about Emma and Lucas, who would soon learn that their father wasn't the failure everyone had told them he was. They would learn that sometimes quiet strength and secret generosity matter more than public displays of wealth and status. The truth had set us all free, even if some of us didn't want to be free from their comfortable lies. 2 weeks later, I sat on the deck of the beach house, my beach house, watching Emma and Lucas build an elaborate sandcastle near the water's edge. The July sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed impossible outside of vacation postcards. Judge Sullivan's final ruling had been even more comprehensive than I'd hoped. I'd been granted primary custody, with Amanda receiving supervised visitation only until she completed court-ordered counseling for her role in the conspiracy. Jake faced federal charges for bank fraud and identity theft, with his real estate license suspended pending criminal trial. Patricia had been forced to move out immediately, finding temporary housing with her sister in upstate New York. Most satisfying was the child support order. Amanda now paid me $400 monthly, a complete reversal that reflected both her income and her reduced parental responsibilities. Brad Wellington's engagement to Amanda had ended the day his SEC investigation became public knowledge, leaving her to face the consequences of her choices alone. "Daddy, look," Emma called out, pointing to their sand architecture. "We built a castle with a moat and everything." "It's amazing, sweetheart. You two are incredible builders." Lucas ran toward me, his hair still damp from swimming in what had once been forbidden waters. "Daddy, can we have a pool party here next weekend, just us?" "Absolutely. We can invite whoever we want to our own house." The irony still amazed me. For 3 years, I'd secretly subsidized Patricia's lifestyle while she built her reputation as the sophisticated woman who could afford Hampton rentals. I'd enabled her social status while she systematically undermined mine. Every charity luncheon, book club meeting, and dinner party she'd hosted had been possible because of my anonymous generosity. Sarah Martinez had helped me trace the full financial impact. I'd been charging Patricia $8,000 monthly for a property that could have rented for $15,000 in peak season. My family had saved over $250,000 over 3 years, money they'd used to maintain lifestyles that made them feel superior to my modest apartment living. The beach house was worth approximately $2.8 million purchased with money I'd made from a successful startup company I'd sold just before my marriage began falling apart. I'd kept the sale quiet, investing the proceeds in real estate, while maintaining my regular job to avoid appearing ostentatious. My phone buzzed with a text from my new business partner, Michael Torres, a former colleague from my marketing days. Contracts signed. Morrison Torres Marketing Solutions officially launches Monday, ready to change the advertising world. Using the equity from the beach house, I'd started my own marketing consultancy firm. Michael brought client relationships and industry connections, while I provided startup capital and strategic vision. We'd already signed 3 major clients, including a tech company looking to expand into East Coast markets. Emma ran up from the beach sand, covering her legs up to her knees. "Daddy, Mommy called and said she's sorry for believing Uncle Jake's lies about you. She wants to take us to dinner tomorrow to apologize properly." Amanda's transformation had been the most surprising development. Losing Brad, facing criminal charges, and discovering the truth about my financial situation had forced her to confront some uncomfortable realities about her choices. Her court-ordered counseling was helping her understand how she'd been manipulated by Jake's calculated lies. "What do you think about that dinner?" I asked Emma. "I think Mommy made mistakes, but everyone deserves chances to fix their mistakes," she said with 7-year-old wisdom that amazed me. Lucas nodded seriously. "Uncle Jake made really bad mistakes, though, like probably too big to fix." Jake's legal troubles were mounting daily. The federal investigation had uncovered additional victims of his illegal financial surveillance, including other clients whose private information he'd accessed inappropriately. His real estate business was collapsing as clients learned about his criminal charges. Patricia had called twice since the court ruling, both times demanding explanations for why I'd humiliated her in front of the entire community. She still couldn't grasp that her own behavior had created the situation, focusing instead on how my revelation had damaged her social standing. "Your grandmother may never understand what really happened," I explained to the children during one of our evening talks. "Sometimes people get so used to treating others badly that they can't see their own mistakes." "Will we see Grandma Patricia again?" Emma asked. "If she learns to treat people with kindness and respect, then maybe. But protecting yourselves from mean people is more important than keeping peace with family members who hurt you." The cottage industry around our story had been unexpectedly intense. Local news outlets picked up the tale of the secret property owner who'd been humiliated at his own beach house. Social media turned it into a viral sensation about family betrayal and hidden generosity. I'd received dozens of interview requests, book deal offers, and even interest from a streaming service about adapting our story. I'd turned them all down, preferring privacy over publicity. What mattered most was rebuilding trust with my children and creating the stable, loving home they deserved. "Daddy, can we paint my new bedroom purple?" Emma asked as we walked back toward the house. "Any color you want, sweetheart. It's your room in your home." The beach house had 4 bedrooms each with ocean views and plenty of space for Emma and Lucas to feel truly at home. They'd spent the previous weekend choosing paint colors, furniture arrangements, and decorations for their new spaces. Lucas had chosen a nautical theme with deep blue walls and ship decorations. Emma wanted purple walls with butterfly stickers and a reading corner near the window. For the first time since their parents' divorce, they had permanent rooms that belonged completely to them. "Will Uncle Jake go to jail?" Lucas asked quietly as we climbed the stairs to the house. "Probably for a little while. He broke important laws when he looked at Daddy's private information without permission." "Good," Emma said firmly. "People shouldn't hurt their family members." As I tucked them into their new beds that night, I reflected on the lessons we'd all learned. Emma and Lucas had discovered that their father was stronger and more successful than they'd been told. They'd learned that sometimes adults lie about each other for selfish reasons, and that standing up for truth matters more than keeping peace. I'd learned that protecting my children from toxic relationships, even with blood relatives, was the most important gift I could give them. I'd learned that secret generosity without appreciation becomes enablement of bad behavior. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones most willing to destroy you for their own benefit. The next morning, I called the Hampton Community Center to arrange a donation. The beach house was more space than we needed, and I'd decided to open it for community events during off-season months. Local youth groups, senior organizations, and charitable functions could use the space for free creating positive memories in a place that had seen too much family cruelty. Emma found me on the deck with my coffee and laptop planning the community programs. "Daddy, are you going to let mean people use our house?" "No, sweetheart. Only kind people who appreciate gifts and treat others well." "That's smart. Mean people don't deserve nice things." As I watched my children play in the waves below, I felt peace settling over our lives for the first time in months. Justice had been served. Truth had prevailed. And my family, my real family of Emma Lucas and me, was finally safe from the people who'd tried to destroy us. The beach house would always remind us that home isn't about having the biggest place or impressing the most people. Home is about surrounding yourself with people who love you unconditionally, who celebrate your successes instead of undermining them, who build you up instead of tearing you down. My children would grow up knowing their father fought for them, protected them, and chose their well-being over family pressure to accept unacceptable treatment. That was worth more than any inheritance, any social status, or any temporary peace purchased with dignity. The truth had set us free, and freedom felt like coming home. Thank you for listening to this story about family betrayal and the power of standing up for truth. I hope it reminds you that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we need to protect ourselves from most carefully, and that true strength often means choosing what's right over what's easy. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed how you saw a situation or person? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about times when hidden truths transformed your understanding of relationships or family dynamics. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in difficult family situations. And please share this story with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself and your children is never selfish. It's necessary. Until next time, remember that your dignity and your children's well-being matter more than keeping peace with people who don't respect either. Take care of yourselves and the people who truly love you.